Hello all, my name is Austin Aguas and I'm here to talk to you guys today about faith, family, and fellowship, a cultural exploration of the family dynamics within the Hispanic and Catholic community. It's a really big community in California, and I'm excited to talk to you today about how we can best serve and engage with the stigmas involved in this community. Well, I'm sure some of you guys are wondering why Catholicism and also why Hispanics within Catholicism, why a subculture of this main culture. Part of the reason is this has very personal significance to me. My grandparents are from Ecuador, my father's parents, and as they migrated to the United States, they brought with them a very strong sense of Hispanic culture, as well as a very deeply rooted tradition in Catholicism. So on one end of my family, I had Catholic faith, and then on my mom's side of the family, I had more of a Baptist upbringing. And so while I was being raised Baptist and learning my values and ethics from the Baptist church, there was also this very deeply spiritual other side of my family I felt like I was never really engaging with in the same way. And so I remember even feeling uncomfortable the first time I went to a church like the one that you see here. I felt like I was doing something wrong. I didn't understand the very deeply spiritual rituals that were going on and what that meant to the people there. And so I figured as someone with Catholics in my family, if I didn't understand it fully, I certainly wouldn't know how to apply it to therapy. And so I figured it'd be very helpful to dive into that today with you guys. Now, additionally, there's also some clinical significance for us. If you are practicing in California, you will run into Catholic Hispanics. I'm almost sure of it. 48% of the Catholics in the United States are Hispanic. So, as we talk about learning how to serve the Hispanic population well, a lot of what that means is learning how the Catholic's faith interacts with their self image and their view of their family. That will, in turn, allow us to serve the Hispanic community well. This is integral, the Catholic faith in the Hispanic community, not just to say that it's important in the here and the now, but there are long-standing and deeply rooted traditions that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Catholic Church was around even before the Christian Church. So for generations, there have been these routines and rituals and development of a culture that is really deep and really, really strong. There were some very strong standing beliefs in this culture that we ought to understand. Along with some of these beliefs, there are also stigmas within this culture. Stigmas that they bring to session, and there are also stigmas that we, as the therapists, might bring to session that might get in the way of culturally competent care. So we will address a little bit of the history of the Hispanic population that is Catholic that came to California, and then we'll talk about some of their beliefs and the stigmas as well. So as far back as the 1700s, the Spanish began migrating to California and creating what we now know as missions. So these missions were Catholic churches and were established all over California. I'm sure you probably live near one if you're anywhere on the coast of California. And not only did these migrants carry Catholic lifestyle with them, but Catholicism also began to attract some of the California natives as well. So we have California natives as well as migrants from all across Latin America who are all migrating to the west coast of America. And as they're creating a new life for themselves, they're using this set of principles, the Catholic faith, to help them establish their sense of self, their sense of family. And like we mentioned before, these are really, really deeply rooted traditions. As they're developing an entirely new lifestyle here and a new life for their families for generations to come, the Catholic Church and the beliefs of Catholicism were a cultural anchor all across California. So let's take a look at the here and now and the traditions and habits of Hispanic Catholics, some of the important things that they have going on throughout their day-to-day lives as well as their yearly calendar. So I'm going to name a couple traditions, and I want you to see if you can kind of pinpoint what these things have in common. There's two elements that are involved in every one of these. So first, we have the quinceañera, which is a coming-of-age celebration when a girl is 15. We have infant baptism and the first communion, kind of a sacraments community event as well. We have Dia de los Muertos, where you're honoring the dead, altars are built, people are praying together, as well as weekly mass. All of these things are traditions of Hispanic Catholics, and there are two things that they all entail. We're talking about faith, and we're talking about family. They're all religious, all of these things, right? Faith and family are intertwined in every one of these things. When we think of a quinceañera, we might think of, a party, the music's bumping, people are having food, it's a great time, and they, of course, are. But at the same time, this is a deeply religious ceremony as well. The girl might present herself to the Virgin Mary, receive a rosary, take part in a Catholic mass like the one that you see in the picture here. And, I know when I grew up, there was a stigma about Catholics that they tend to be more passive in their faith, that they kind of just went through certain motions. But I want you to take a look at all these traditions and just challenge that belief a little bit. One last one that I want to mention is just living life together. I talked to my dad a little bit as I was preparing for this presentation, and he said, yes, certainly, I remember a lot of these traditions taking place. However, the things that I remember most that were most regular was getting together with other families and going and getting groceries together, right? As someone who grew up, in America on the West Coast, couldn't even imagine that, right? Going and getting groceries with other families. All the neighbors coming over for dinner a couple times a week, having barbecues with our garages open and the entire block, going and sharing food. Things I never experienced, right? But there's a beautiful way that Hispanic Catholics value spending time in community, and it leads them to just living life together as part of their traditions, right? So as we think about this from a psychological perspective, a highly communal, highly collectivistic set of values for this very specific population group. So moving on to how to view this population from a therapeutic perspective. In 2 words, I would say we need to understand cultural expectations. Now, many Catholics practice some folk traditions alongside the classic, or you might say canonical Catholic traditions, as ways to cope with loss, grief, depression, or really just any acute stressor that's going on in their life. So maybe instead of feeling like they can go to their community with their grief, they might not want to bring everybody down. There might be a certain cultural expectation about being positive around community, and so they value community so much, but they might internalize that, if they have a problem, they have to take it more to the Virgin Mary, or they might pray to a saint to help them out. They might, pray for a miracle in a very deeply spiritual way. And while these practices in themselves are not harmful, it's important that as therapists we realize what messages they're internalizing. If there's any sort of, maladaptive thinking patterns here, right? So these things are good. We don't want to disrespect the culture and tell them not to engage spiritually this way. But we need to understand that they can also make people feel alone, isolated, or maybe even out of touch with the reality of their situation at times. And so, alongside with these very deep spiritual beliefs, traditional and maybe a little bit more focused in folklore as well, we also have a really strong sense of gender roles, which I know we've talked about a little bit in this class already this semester. We have this machismo, this very strong role Hispanic men take on. And there's also really strong roles for women too, even having Mary be such a prominent figure in their religion, kind of the sacrificial mother. You also have these sacrificial daughter roles that will develop as well. And so, like already mentioned, these gender roles are not to be completely torn down or dismantled. It's about respecting the culture while pointing out ways that the culture might be causing cognitive distortions of some kind, such as if I don't do this or that, I'm a failure. If I cry and talk about my problems, I am weak, right? If I don't sacrifice this for my family, then that means I failed and they're going to leave me, right? We want to make sure this population specifically can feel vulnerable and safe around their family because their family is such an important part of their lives. All right, and lastly, there are 3 key takeaways that I want to leave you guys with that are in the form of clinical considerations. So the first is to respect the role of the Catholic faith. This is a core coping mechanism that goes back generations and generations. Remember, we're not trying to take them away from their faith or the culture. The goal is not to dismantle. This is really, really disrespectful when you try and bring something down that's been a pillar of their family. The goal is to respect their faith and work alongside their faith to provide them support. The next 2 kind of go into talking about how to do that, and they really go together. It's understanding the importance of the family system and being aware of stigma and approaching that stigma with cultural humility. So remember, all the traditions that we talked about earlier, every one of them involved community. Their lives are built around family, friends, elders. Their day-to-day life is wrapped up, built around their family, right? So we need to, in a way, when we conduct therapy, come with a family-centered approach. This might look like including extended family in therapy, right? Or valuing and acknowledging the collectivism that's going on in their life. Asking them questions such as, how would making a certain change improve things in your family? Do you see yourself as a machismo father? Do you see yourself as a sacrificial daughter in your family? Who do you turn to for support in your family? Right? And all of these questions, what they do is they validate the importance of family. So if you were to say, you need to stop worrying about what your parents think, this is your own life, make decisions for yourself, this is really American and Western and individualistic, and it completely invalidates their bond with their family. And it makes them have to choose between this really deeply rooted tradition that's been going on for hundreds of years and their family, which is really unfair to our client and puts them in a really difficult spot where they need to choose between their family or their therapist. Well, I know for me this presentation absolutely flew by. There's so many things that I wish that I had the time to say, but I want to thank you guys for your time. Thank you guys for listening. I hope as you practice in California and reach this Hispanic Catholic population, you remember maybe just those 3 key takeaways from that last slide. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.